So, proceeding further, and I think it's very interesting to see how the oxygen that we inhale goes into the system, the human system, and then is carried to different parts of the cells. And the organs that play an important role in the transportation of oxygen come under the system called the respiratory system. So, as you start, when you inhale, the first point or the location through which the oxygen finds entry, of course, if your mouth is also kept open and the nostrils are already there as an opening, there is every chance of oxygen entering your windpipe here also through the mouth. But I ask a question. I have seen people who also breathe through their mouth and they have some difficulty breathing through their nose. There could be many reasons because of some nasal congestion. When you have a cold cough, your nose is blocked, you tend to inhale through your mouth also. And there could be some minor muscular distortions or muscular blocks or certain polyps, we call it as polyps, and certain growth inside which may block the nasal opening, and it will make you feel rather not comfortable while breathing. So keeping these little questions for a research later, let me tell you there is an advantage of just closing your mouth closed and taking the air through the nostrils or the nasal opening. And why it is, because I think I mentioned in my previous lessons that there are fine hair like structures, the tiny hairs inside the nasal cavity here. Okay, and they are called the cilia, CILIA. This cilia plays an important role in preventing the foreign particles and the dust, especially the dust particles, from entering into your nose. If you had an opportunity to travel in a desert and if you're not covering your nostrils properly, you have every chance and every reason to take in the dust along with the air and you will feel suffocated. So, the very prevention of it is now the air is so much polluted with so much of population around, and you know how the pollution, air pollution is caused. So, you need to take care of taking in air that is rich in oxygen. Whenever you say that I'm breathing in a good, pure air, it has almost about 21% of oxygen in the inhaled air, and it has about 0.04% of carbon dioxide. So that is supposed to be the purest and the maximum oxygen content in the air that you take in. So these are the advantages of taking in through the nose and not through the mouth. With the mouth, of course, you have no such mechanism to prevent the entry of foreign particles or the dust particles. So it's always better to keep the mouth closed. Even while sleeping, some people have the tendency to, keep the mouth open, and sometimes the snoring happens. All that is related. We will discuss about it, why people snore and everything. You can find out answers. I'm just posing these questions which you can note down in your journal book or in your textbook. So the air that enters through the nostrils, and what was the process I said? It is taking in, or the scientific term that you use is called inhalation. Inhale and inhalation. 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 You inhale oxygen and it goes through the nostrils and through the nasal cavity. It enters the windpipe, or you call this the little larynx here, larynx somewhere connecting the trachea and the nasal cavity, the larynx, and then the trachea or the windpipe. It then branches into two branches called the tracheae. Tracheae is plural, trachea is singular. The tracheae then end up as smaller sacs called the airbags or the air sacs or the alveolus. The alveolus are nothing but it is an elastic airbag. ALVEOLUS is singular, alveoli is plural. So there are many alveoli, elastic sacs, which are the main components of the expandable, elastic, spongy lungs. The lungs are made up of tiny air sacs called alveoli. This is the way you defined alveoli. So the air that goes in through the trachea branches into the tracheae, and the tracheae also go into finer branches or ramifications, and they end up as alveoli in the lungs. This is how the oxygen finds its way to the lungs. Apart from this, what are the other structures in the human system that help in allowing the lungs to expand and allowing the lungs to contract, so that when it expands, it getting the air filled in like a balloon, and when it contracts, it pushes the air out. The very purpose of the lungs to expand is to take in maximum oxygen, and the purpose of it to contract is to push out the carbon dioxide, and this is invariably done by the blood that comes to the lungs. So blood is responsible ultimately to take the oxygen from the lungs to the different parts of the body, and it gives oxygen to all the cells. So once it delivers the oxygen to all the cells like a delivery man, on it also plays the role of the dump truck. It collects all the waste gaseous products like carbon dioxide, and that is brought back through the heart to the lungs, and from the lungs carbon dioxide is given out back as a gaseous form. So the air that enters the nostril enters the nasal cavity, then of course the little larynx here, and it enters the windpipe, and from the windpipe it goes to the tracheae, and from the tracheae to the alveoli, and finally the lungs. And the lungs are protected in a rib cage. In our body, we call this from the lower neck to the upper abdomen, we call this as the thorax, thorax. So the thoracic region has many ribs, it's a rib cage, you can see in the picture. It's called a rib cage. It's like a cage, it's like a case made out of the rib bones. The rib bones hold the lungs and they protect the lungs, and also the heart to some extent, which is tilted towards the left side of your rib cage. So the lungs are protected inside the rib cage, and there is another muscular structure that separates the thorax from the abdomen. So you always have a structure like this. You have from here till here as the thorax, and from here you start the abdomen till the pelvic region, right? So probably if I show you a picture, you will understand that better. So the diaphragm is a muscular structure that separates the thorax from the abdomen, and whenever you inhale and you keep your hands on the chest, okay, you find your chest portion going outward. The rib bones, they go out, they project a little and they expand. That time what happens, the diaphragm, which is a muscular one, it gets pushed down. Actually it gets pushed down, so there is a cavity, huge space available between the thorax and the abdomen, and the lungs can expand fully, and the oxygen that you inhale gushes into the lungs very fast because the lungs are expanding. There is space for the oxygen to get into the lungs. Similarly, the oxygen, the blood that brings in carbon dioxide to the lungs has to be given out. So once you inhale, the oxygen that gets pushed into the blood, and there is another set of blood vessel veins. You recall that veins bring in the deoxygenated blood and they push it back into the alveoli, and that has to be thrown out. That cannot be retained in the lungs. So what happens during exhalation? This is inhalation. During exhalation, you feel that the chest is going back again to the normal position, and the diaphragm also gets curved like this, and it compresses the place between the lungs and the abdomen. So the space gets restricted. During expansion, suppose if this is the diaphragm, if it is like this, during inhalation, what happens? The rib cage goes up, and the rib cage goes up, and this diaphragm goes down. It bends down a little like this. So the space is increased. During exhalation, this comes back again, and this goes back. So this is the process of exhalation and inhalation, and the carbon dioxide, once the space inside the rib cage is narrowed down, there is also a compression on the lungs, and the air is naturally forced to come out of the tracheae back, and then back through the nostril the carbon dioxide comes out. This is how the exchange of gases take place. And when we exhale, naturally the muscles connected to the rib cage, they get relaxed. How does the bone move? Ultimately the bones are all attached to muscles, so muscles play an important role in moving the bones. So the muscles that are attached to the rib cage bones, they get relaxed a little, causing the rib cage to move down and move inwards. So when I exhale, inhale, exhale, so what happens, the muscles, they get relaxed, and naturally the rib cage gets moved down and inwards. So due to this, the diaphragm is released and it moves upwards. As a result, the chest cavity gets smaller, due to which the air in the lungs is pushed out. So this is how the mechanism works. And of course, breathing exercises, as suggested in yoga, they also increase the air capacity, because anything that is kept in a usable condition will always function the best. So this results in an increased supply of oxygen, and the elasticity of the air sacs, it is kept alive for a longer time. It doesn't lose its elasticity. The capacity of it to expand and contract is kept to the maximum with such yogic exercises. So the muscles, the wall with which the alveoli or the air sacs are made up of, they can easily expand and contract. So there is no stiffness that is created at any time because of the exercises you keep doing. The cells that constitute the alveoli also are actively involved in keeping them very active, and that helps the lung sacs to expand at a very rapid rate and a faster rate to take in more oxygen. So it is generally recommended to practice these exercises in the morning when there is a fresh air available, so that more oxygen is taken in. And similarly, what do we breathe out? As I told you, we breathe out carbon dioxide, and the percentage of oxygen in exhaled air is 16%, whereas that of carbon dioxide is 4.4%. During respiration, the only respiratory organs to move are the lungs and diaphragm. No other organs will move in a respiratory system. No other organs will play any role. It is only the lungs and the diaphragm that keep moving in and out, or contract and expand, or they keep moving up and down to do the process. When we breathe in polluted air or dust, and also other irritants also get accumulated in our nose along with oxygen, as I told you. So these irritants, they get trapped in the nostril hair called the cilia, and they reach to the nasal cavity and irritate its wall sometimes. When you also inhale dust, and when there is some when you clean up your house also, this irritation is felt, and what happens, you feel like sneezing. That irritation that is caused in the walls of the nose along with the dust and other irritants that gets into your nose, you have a tendency to sneeze and throw it out of your nose. So this is also one of the reasons for why, even when a cooking is done or when the smoke carries some spices in it, all these will stimulate and irritate the nasal wall, and that immediately will send a message, and it won't even wait. It's a reflex reaction that you immediately sneeze. It won't wait for instructions. But irrespective of the place, yawning is one thing. Why do you yawn? It's another question that we all have to do in the research period. Why do we yawn and why do we sneeze? And we don't ask anybody's permission. We just yawn when we feel that we are tired and the oxygen supply to the brain is lacking. We all yawn, tendency to yawn to compensate for the less supply of oxygen to the head. And of course, we sneeze when the nose suddenly feels the irritation. You have a tendency to sneeze, and there are so many allergic sneezes and allergic cough, irritants. So this is a huge topic that you can take it up for further exploration and extended learning opportunity. So this is how the breathing mechanism happens in human beings. I hope you would have understood with the structure. So recalling the basic structure, through the nostril, through the nasal cavity, it enters the trachea, through the windpipe, from the trachea to the branching tracheae, from the branching tracheae to the alveoli, the alveoli or the minute sacs that constitute the lungs. So the movement of the lungs is monitored, the expansion is monitored by the movement of the rib cage, and rib cage muscles have to undergo a relaxation and contraction to make the rib cage move up and down to allow for inhalation and exhalation. Now we'll take some time to do a silent reading and we will revise. Thank you.